Boker Tov and welcome to our 2016 Homeschool Family Conference. And in this session, we're going to talk about a variety of ways to customize your child's education. I've received a list of reader questions and comments, and we just thought we would take this session to address some of the most popular ones. My name is Ann Elliott, and I'm the creator and founder of HomeschoolingTorah.com. Okay, on special needs, my research has shown that there are really two reasons for learning problems. And we need to, before we can fix a special need problem like a learning disability or even a health problem, we first have to discover what caused the problem in the first place. So, if there are two basic reasons, it could be your child is having trouble in school, say they're having trouble with phonics or math, and those are the kinds of learning problems I'm thinking of in this session. Maybe it's just that there is a gap in their knowledge. Maybe they never learned things well in the first place. Now, I'm thinking more of an older child, maybe from 10 years old and up, and all of a sudden they are struggling with a subject such as math or reading or just even an interest in school at all. You might ask yourself if they are missing some basic skills. Now, in one of our earlier sessions, we talked about the order of skills that are needed in order for a child to mature. And we started with character, and it could be that your child's learning problems are just a simple lack of character. And if that's the problem, go back and watch that session, and it will help you out. But then you have to be, after character, you have to learn skills. And skills could be anything in reading from learning to decode the letters and actually look at a letter and know what that letter is symbolizing and what sound it's making. It could be a lack of skill in math. Maybe they are being asked to multiply, and multiplication requires a whole range of skills, from adding and subtracting to multiplying and dividing to remembering to check to having neat and tidy skills, as you bring numbers down. There's so many skills that are brought together at one time that maybe your child, you're finding some areas of weakness where maybe they can't subtract very well, or maybe they never learned place value and how to line numbers up. So it could be just something really simple like that. However, most of the time we find that the learning problems are simply a piece of damage somewhere in the body, and they're having a hard time learning about that because they are overcoming a health problem. And it could be a health problem that was caused at birth. Maybe they're adopted, and the family that the child is from, gave them a whole host of passed on problems. Or maybe that is, coming from your own family. And it's not the child's fault, and there really isn't anything you can do to go back in time. But if you know about it, it can really help. Now, this is when it can be very handy to get an outside professional to come in and diagnose the child, not because we care about labels, but because it helps the mom and the dad understand what the problem is that they're dealing with. And once you know what the problem is, then you can come up with a plan to actually how to help, if not fix it, at least balance it with a skill in another area. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say you have a child who is blind. Obviously, without the help of Jehovah himself, you can't fix blindness. So what you would do is increase the ability in other senses, such as their hearing, their touch, and help the child learn to compensate for the lack in one area with an increased ability in another area. It's no different for any kind of learning disability. If a child, let's say, is hyperactive disorder, you would need to compensate by increasing the skills in other areas so that they can learn to function in society, they can function and be around other people. You could have autism, you could have Asperger's, you could have food allergies that really make a child feel sick all the time, or other chronic disorders. So it really doesn't matter what the disorder is. You've got an area of weakness, and you need to increase it by increasing all of the other areas of strength. Okay, one of the biggest areas that we hear is a mental problem where their brain is just not able to communicate from one hemisphere to the other. Let's say there's an area of actual brain damage, And honestly, I think most problems are on the spectrum somewhere of, could be a really serious problem to a really minor problem, but they all have a similar root. And that if your brain could learn to communicate with one hemisphere and the other hemisphere properly, then you would find all of these learning pieces falling into place. So this is a gap in ability, not in a gap of knowledge. And what we need to do is to help the brain learn to communicate with both sides properly. Now, there are some really cool ways that you can do this. One of them is to do what is called cross-pattern exercises. If your brain, the right side and the left side need to function correctly, then it helps to exercise them equally. We see this in a child that is learning to crawl, a baby. Okay, if a baby does not learn to crawl before he learns to walk, we find that he has not exercised both sides of his brain equally, and you'll often find a little bit of a delay later on in reading and some of the activities that require both sides to cooperate with each other. Math and reading and music will show that very quickly. But sometimes it will even show in social abilities. Believe it or not, you need both sides of your brain to cooperate if you're going to handle stimulation coming at you in a social environment. A lot of noise, a lot of changes in hot and cold, just all the different senses that are working at one time, they are requiring both sides of the brain. So, it's really handy if you still have a small baby at home and you have not come to the point where they can sit up and walk, you want to encourage your baby to crawl. Put them on their tummy and help them get muscle strength in their arms. Not only does it, we're going to talk about oxygen in a moment, but it increases their lung capability and gets more oxygen to the brain as well. It seems like in everything else we've talked about in the other sessions, if you skip a level, like if you skip character development and go straight to trying to teach your child school subjects, but they haven't learned to obey or to have a good attention span, you're going to find delays. You're going to find problems and you really need to back up and go down to those fundamental skills and come back. So if you have a child that is in elementary school and they're having trouble with brain injury kind of things, Asperger's, autism, the whole range like that, then you really could back up. You can't likely get them to want to crawl around the house, but you could play with them and encourage them to use right and left, encourage them to run and to move their arms, I hope you can see here, move your arms, from right to left, to go to the playground and go cross-handed on the bars, to kick a ball with their primary side. If it should be their right side, or if they're left-handed, it should all be the left side. Their eye, their ear, their hand, their foot, all should be coordinated on one side. And usually it's the right, but either one is fine. But if you see a cross, maybe they're dominant in their left eye, they listen more with their right, they do handwriting with their left hand and they kick a ball with their right hand, you've got some brain problems going on there. And you can identify that very easily at home. And the way to fix that is to train them to use both sides. Another one is going up and down stairs. Does a child always go with one foot at a time, or do they equally go left, right, left, right? It's not fancy. You don't need a therapist to do these things. You just need to be aware of it so that you can encourage them. And it is interesting that going outside and playing is one of the very best things they can do. Jumping on a trampoline, swinging, climbing up things, climbing down things. Those are excellent ways to develop the brain, and you can write it down for school time. It is actually incredibly valuable. Okay, they also need oxygen to the brain. So as they're playing outside, they are increasing their lung capability and getting more oxygen to the brain. And you can also increase it by giving them foods that are rich in oxygen, such as green vegetables, chlorophyll and green drinks and smoothies, beets. Increase their iron supplement if you have it tested and see that it needs it. But it's something to suspect. Okay, you can stimulate the five senses in other ways too. Having them do hands-on things, cutting, large motor things, using their ears by putting earphones on and letting them listen to music in both ears at the same time, letting them use their eyes to have them focus on something close and something far away, and then close and then far away. Have them read the words on a chart, both big words and small words. Have them write in both large letters and small letters. Those are things that will increase their muscle abilities, both large muscle and small muscle, and increase all 5 senses using tactile, which is just touching. Basically, again, if this is a child in elementary school, you're going to back them up to what we would traditionally know as preschool abilities: cutting, mazes, dot to dot, coloring in the lines and trying not to go out of the lines for the ability of control, not for the ability of creativity and art. This is a totally different subject. So these are all things that you can do, and it's common sense if you are aware of it, if you know to think about it. Have them smell things. Don't overwhelm them. And some kids, have a sensory issue where they can't handle too much, or maybe they are overstimulated in one sense. Try to see if you can even those senses out gently and carefully. And it's best if a mom writes these things down for her own sake so that she will remember to have her child do that. I want to talk real quick about the power of music. The scriptures talk about the power of music when King Saul was being harassed by an evil spirit. And I'm not saying that special needs are an evil spirit, but we do know that music calmed him down. And I have seen even, in my own life, that music can calm me down. Music is one of those disciplines that crosses both sides of the brain. And so a child that is weak in one side or in one area can use music to stimulate all of them. That is why it's so valuable. On top of that, there's research that shows that it goes from brain cells, the neurons that are storing things in the brain, to neurons that are storing things other places, such as in our heart, our intestines, our kidneys. All of those places have neurons. It's not just in your head. So the more you can stimulate all of those and help them to grow new neurons, help them to flourish, the better. So music is a fantastic way, and I don't mean just singing, but also learning about music. You can see that maybe singing would be a right brain thing, and being creative and expressive, but also learning about the steps and the half notes and the quarter notes and the scales and the theory that is involved. And of course, with a young child, you can still teach them these things. So try to stimulate both sides, but just simply putting earphones on. And I like earphones because it puts it close to your mind, helps you block out all distractions, and it really helps to stimulate the brain. Scripture reaches the heart. And when I say the heart, I literally do mean the neurons in your actual beating heart and the neurons in your intestines. The scriptures talk about how things go into your, especially in the King James Version, you'll see it. It hit me in my kidney. His intestines failed because he had no courage. Well, scientists have found that that's actually very true. The neurons in our actual head are separate from the neurons in the rest of our body, but they all work together to create memories, to create the ability to learn. I do believe this is why it says that the fear of Jehovah is the beginning of wisdom. We know from Psalm 19 that the fear of Jehovah comes from his Torah. So I would emphasize the Torah. But I think all of the scriptures are incredibly valuable, and having a child recite and repeat seems very simple, but it is excellent for special needs kids. Okay, there's also nutrition, oils, herbs, all of those things that have been given to us by Jehovah, the Creator. And then simply now, once you've identified the problem and you're actually trying to grow new brain neurons to strengthen what's there, to make it more well balanced and developed, then you simply have to go back to the academics and reteach. Reteach things that they would have had at an earlier level. Take the grade levels completely off. You don't need those there. Don't worry about that your 12-year-old is still learning addition or learning to sound out letters. That is fine. Go back and reteach and drill and get a good foundation instead of jumping ahead just for the fact that your neighbor family, their 12-year-old is studying at this level, so you think your child. Don't compare. It says in 2 Corinthians that comparing is not wise. We are given the abilities and personalities that Jehovah expected and intended for us to have. So don't compare your child to someone else. Go back, give them a good foundation. Start with character, as we learned in another session. Then go on to skills and content before you worry about all of the higher level things. Finally, I would say to start by making a plan for mom. I mentioned this a second ago, but you are going to need to be intentional about what you do. Make a plan and revisit it. Maybe at the beginning you'll revisit it once a week, but then go on later and revisit it once a month and maybe once a quarter. Schedule it onto your calendar. I use Google Calendar, have it send you a reminder and say, don't forget to do this. Maybe you'll need a time out with your husband and just discuss your plans. You'll see what's working and what maybe you haven't been so consistent on doing and you need to actually step it up a little bit. That'll help you a lot. When mom has chronic health problems, you are given a set of unique challenges. The mom has a high expectation of what she would like to teach her children, but she doesn't have the physical stamina to actually keep up with it. I can relate to this a lot because this has been my situation many times. I'll plan out a new school year and then it never fails. I get sick and all of my plans are gone. I do know one thing, that when you have chronic health problems, you have good days and you have bad days. And when you have good days, you can take advantage of them by gently doing things, not overdoing. But when you have bad days, you can prepare ahead for those bad days and let other people help you. One of the things that I was always worried about is that the scriptures say a child left to himself brings his mother to shame. So I didn't want to leave my kids alone, but I didn't have the physical stamina to keep up with teaching. So I personally think it's okay. I see the Proverbs 31 woman delegating a lot of her work to servant girls. And you can go and look at that verse and see that she's not doing it all herself. She's managing others and they are doing some of the work. And she may come along and coach and train and teach and help them by giving them lists and stuff. But even books and videos and curriculum can come alongside as your servant girls and can help you to accomplish your goals without you having to be physically expending energy to do it. You need to be prepared. Be prepared for the realistic thing that you probably won't feel good sometime. When you're feeling well, you probably think that you're always going to feel well, and you get this false hope that everything is better. And then when you get sick, you feel very discouraged because you weren't really prepared for that inevitable thing. So I say to prepare ahead of time. You can prepare by having a checklist for the day. Now, I have up here our school schedule, and this is just something that we've written out for this current school schedule, and this would be for a day that I'm feeling well because there's a lot here, but on a day that I'm not feeling well, I could take out this middle section of schoolwork. I can still wake up, have someone, have them make a simple breakfast. We can probably read the Torah together, and if I don't feel well or my husband is not here, then we could have an audio Bible or something like, even a video version on YouTube. I could put a link to that. Have that be the thing that reads it aloud. Then some of this work can be done, instead of me teaching it orally, it can be done by worksheet or it can be done by video. There are so many ways that you can teach this without you having to physically be the teacher. Your job is basically to check the checklist to make sure that it actually all gets done. But you need to have that checklist made up ahead of time. Maybe you could have a clipboard that you have handy and you just keep it in your kitchen or somewhere, and on a day that you're not feeling well, you can say, kids, today is a clipboard day, go see what you're going to do next. You need to plan ahead for meals and for chores because those are the essentials. You need to have good food. When you're feeling well, maybe arrange to get some food in the freezer so that you have something you can pull out on a day that you're not feeling well. And to train the younger kids even how to make simple breakfast and a simple lunch. The older they are, of course, the more help you have. But if you only have little kids, you can teach them how to have a really simple everything. They like cheese and crackers. They don't have to be fancy, but you need to be prepared ahead of time, even so much as having the food in the house. So routines help. Kids need to know what to expect next, and that's why I like having a list like this. It can be a modified list for days I don't feel well and a full list for the days that I do. And kids really enjoy that. They want to know, Mom, what's next? What's next? And it kind of makes them feel relaxed, and when they're relaxed, you can go sleep on the couch a little better. You need to also know, though, that a routine is not the same as a schedule. One thing I'm missing on here is this is not a schedule. This does not have any time on it. On an ideal day, I would wake up at 7 o'clock. But when I'm sick, I might not wake up till 9 or 9:30. And yet, after that point, everything can kind of continue on as normal. Or maybe your kids can start breakfast before you wake up. It depends on the age of them, of course. But you don't have to feel bound to a clock. What you're doing is letting people know what's next, not what time it is. Does that make sense? It's okay for you to take break times. And when I found that a break time for me, when I need to lie down and rest, if I will lie down horizontally, I feel better faster than if I try to sit up in a chair and feel better. So maybe you can prepare by having, if you have young children, prepare by having a basket of toys in your bedroom, maybe a small TV so you can put in a video or something. But wherever you lie down, try to lie down horizontally. Even if you're with your kids, it'll help you feel better sooner than if you're sitting up. It's okay to admit, by the way, that you're tired. It's okay to let them see you cry. They need to know that you're human just like them. They are sometimes the best at comforting. And it's not, don't feel that you have to be superhuman. You need to give yourself the grace. Jehovah allowed this in your life. And one of the best ways that you can show your thankfulness and contentment is by being okay with the fact that you don't feel well. And even if you have to cry, it's okay. Remember that Deuteronomy 6:7 says that you will teach his commands diligently to your children when you rise up and when you lie down. He allows for those things in our lives. It's perfectly okay. And he knew that you were your child's mom, and he still providentially put those kids in your life. So you can give yourself that grace. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, Proverbs 29:15 says, "The rod of correction gives wisdom, but a child left to himself causes shame to his mother." What is a rod of correction? A rod of correction sounds like it would be something awful. You know, I've got a yardstick here. Is this my rod of correction? No, I don't think so. A rod of correction is much more to do with what we were talking about in an earlier session, where we hear, learn, keep, and do. The word learn in that passage means to gently goad, to put someone on the right path through encouragement. It doesn't mean you whack them into gear. It means you help them. So if a parent is having to work and maybe is not even home for many of the hours that a child is being homeschooled, or maybe for whatever reason your child is having to do more than the normal amount of independent study, it's okay for you to not physically be there as long as you are able to goad them, to remind them, to get them on the path. Maybe that means you call them often, but I have found one of the simplest ways is to give each child their own clipboard and let them have a checklist of what they need to do each day. Then when they are done with the work, they put it in a special spot, maybe on your desk or the kitchen counter, and you have to be responsible and diligent to actually check the work. That is the part where you can goad them and encourage them, write them notes for the next day and so on. But if you never check it, then they start slipping and don't actually do the work, and you'll find after a while this is not working. So we can certainly fulfill Deuteronomy 6:7 of teaching them when we sit up, when we lie down, when we walk, and when we, rise up, as long as we are doing that long distance by checking up on them and monitoring their progress and being sure that really it comes down to ourselves. We have to be the ones that are diligent to check. Have a plan. It just depends on the age of what their abilities will be. If they're younger, they're going to need more input, and you can get that from other things such as video. But if they're older, I would suggest turning that more into books and having them learn to read instructions. So reading with our eyes is better for brain development than watching it on a video. So you can get your child old enough to learn from a book and to learn to read instructions, to learn to search for information and memorize it, to take notes and to mark things, the better. And this is a skill that all children need, not just children whose parents are working. You can use technology to help, but your goal is to eventually get them to read for either the Word of God or their subjects such as history and science and grammar, foreign language, all of those things. Specifically with our curriculum, you can take the instructions that are for the parents and just don't give them the answer key, and let them read the instructions that we would give to you and read it for themselves. And then you can use the answer key later to check up on them. All right, if you are going to be making a daily routine, I've got a little bit of ours up here. The place that I would start, I'm going to grab my marker. I would start with food. Yeah, that's a terrible thing. Here we go. There, breakfast. Down here we have lunch. And then later in the day, you'll have supper. I would start there because your body has circadian rhythms, and those rhythms are developed by hormones. When hormones are released, it helps you get this gentle rhythm. Everyone will sleep better. So start with the meals. If you have a baby, that's where you start. You always start with feeding the baby, not with sleep training. Making sure that the baby is fed consistently at normal times. And as those times become more and more regular, then you notice that their sleep cycles start to regulate and they get a little bit longer hunk of time of sleep. And it's the same thing with kids and adults. So when you have regular meal times, even if you don't always have them at the same time every day, if more the space between the meals being consistent so that your body knows when to release those hormones. You also need rhythms of light and darkness. So it is a good idea to have a regular wake-up time so that your children, their eyes get used to the light. Sometimes us in the more northern states, we have more extremes of light and dark, and we find that it affects us. You have seasonal affective disorder, and it really is based on wake-up time. So you might want to adjust your wake-up time so that you're waking up closer to sunrise or the same distance from sunrise every day. So those are the places to start when setting up a daily routine. After that, I wouldn't worry so much about time. As I said a few moments ago, I would more ask, what are your priorities in a day? And I would start with the things that are of higher priority to you. For you as mom, you want to make sure that you wake up enough before the kids or have private time, quiet time, that you can have a chance to get a shower, a chance to get your coffee, and a chance to have your prayer time and your Bible reading before your kids come up and everything starts to get crazy. It'll help you feel a lot more able to deal with all of the things that they bring into the day. What does your spouse want in the day? That's very important. If he is away working and is going to be home at a certain time, then you're going to want to adjust back maybe a time to clean up the house before he gets there. What time does he want supper? How does he want his evenings to go? If you can put those into your day first, then you'll know what you have left to work with. What other outside activities do you have? Do you need to go grocery shopping each week? Do you have outside classes such as piano lessons and sports activities? And you'll notice that this can all start to fill up really quick. So this helps us put our priorities again. What is most important? Is sports more important than math? And you'll know it by how much time you have left. Another thing is you put your routine. You want to vary activities from sitting at the table and studying and having to hold still with activities where you can get up and move. And sometimes I think that we forget that in a school environment, these kids will get breaks, they can go to the bathroom, they're going to have a lot of flip-flop between sitting still and getting to move around. And sometimes we as homeschool moms forget that, and we expect them to sit for hours and hours, and we don't let them get their wiggles out. Even having activities that they can sit on the floor and play, I'm thinking smaller kids, while you read to them would be a big help. All in all, just be sure that everything is balanced, that you're not being focused too much on one thing and forgetting other important things. I think in making my routine, it's one of the last things I do before I start a new school year, because I need to know before I can do that, what are my goals? What is the real reason I'm homeschooling? What are the weaknesses and strengths that we have this school year? What has the Spirit put on our hearts to really teach our kids? And it kind of flows once you know those things. So don't start here. This should be one of the last things. If you want to encourage a love of learning with your kids, you need to remember one thing, that more is caught than is taught. You can teach your kids and try to encourage them to be a reader, for instance, but if you never read books yourself, they're likely not to read either. You can tell your kids to go to college, but if you don't really ever emphasize subjects that they would need for that, then they probably won't want to. It depends on you, and your likes and dislikes are very different from your neighbor's likes and dislikes. Your kids aren't over there in their house, they're in your house, so it doesn't really matter what they're doing. You are the apple tree from which all the apples are going to be falling. If you want to encourage a love of learning, you need to love learning too. One of the best ways to encourage a love of learning is to actually talk about things. And I don't mean things that are on the schedule for the day, but just to actually have discussions with your kids about a variety of subjects and just things that are interesting to you. Treat them like friends and discuss things with them and toss ideas off of them. Look things up together, learn how to use resources such as the internet and local libraries, and how to use an index and a table of contents in a book. Be willing to leave your lesson plans, to look at the lesson plan and what it says for you to do that day and say, no, that's not what we're doing today, and not feel guilty about it. Put it away and say, you know what, this is the first sunny day we've had in 3 weeks. We're not going to do this today. We're going to go on a nature walk instead. Or whatever, maybe company is coming and you know that you're not going to be able to do the normal subjects. What else could you do with your kids that would help them learn things and help them grow but won't be on that lesson plan? Or let's say you're studying science and you're studying about, the force of water, and you could stay on that lesson plan. You could watch a YouTube, you could make a little notebooking page, or you could go out to a river or a lake or a swimming pool and you could actually interact with water, and I think they would learn a lot more. That lesson plan is put there by a very generic person. Even if it's me, we don't know what's going on in your home and where you are and what your situation is. You are the principal of your school and you know that better than anyone else. So feel free to just look at it as a guide and then say, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way. If nothing else, all the curriculum did is give you an idea, and that idea can be taken by you, the teacher, and you can run with it. For an example, otherwise in our curriculum, I would say American history is a great place to leave the lesson plans and to go out on your own, especially if you live right here in the United States and maybe you live in an area where there's some really neat historical things that you could go see. Your children would learn so much more about history than they would from a book. But on top of that, we have so many books in the curriculum that you may not normally take the time to read. You could slow the whole curriculum down, do it over 2 or 3 years, and just gently, slowly read through the books. And I think your kids would learn better than if you try to stick to 180 days and get it done because it's the next checkbox to mark off. Another thing to increase the love of learning with your kids is to allow them to be bored. If you entertain your kids and set up their entire day for them, you'll notice mine goes through lunch. The rest of the time I don't really want to schedule too much. I want them to be bored. And they're not allowed to tell me they're bored. So if they're bored, I'm going to send them off to go find something to do, and I might suggest they have to sit in their room and play with Legos for 30 minutes. If they keep telling me they're bored, I'm going to print off a bunch of math worksheets and make them do them, because I don't want them to ever say that again. I want them to use their imagination and to go out and look for something to do. So I want to remind you one more time about the 5 levels of maturity for your child. Of course, we've talked about character, but then it comes to skill, and then content, and then communication. If you want your child to have a love of learning, build those primary foundations nice and strong so that they have good character that will help them, and then they have the skill that will give them the tools that they need so that they can start to learn content and then communicate it out of their own passions and desires and the things that Jehovah has placed them into their hearts that are their unique abilities. But those primary foundational levels are your most important thing because you will equip them. Finally, I wanted to say in Proverbs 16:21 it says that pleasant words promote instruction. If you want to have a love of learning in your children, try to have a home that's filled with pleasant words instead of yelling and hollering and anger. And I know that sounds simple, but it is too often not true. And you'll see that your children have a love of learning. I wanted to mention a couple books before I leave this subject. First of all, Learning in Spite of Labels by Joyce Herzog. It's an excellent book that can help your child, help you help your child if he has special needs of any sort. If he has any sort of a label, I highly recommend this book. I also want to talk about Heart and Mind. It's by Ruth B. Chicken. It's what the Bible says about learning. This one is more philosophical, but it's going to talk to you about the Hebrew words that describe the heart and the mind, and what that actually has to do with learning. I think they're fascinating, and if you have a child with special needs or you just want to be a better parent and better teacher, I highly recommend this book.